to think too much on it. I had to work overtime that night and started heading home at around midnight. When I pulled up to my home, I saw Jake sitting on my doorstep. I really didn't want to get out of my car, but I did, and I walked up to him. He started off politely, asking if I'd thought over his proposal. I said no, that I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. Once again, as if a switch had flipped, he went off on me, calling me spoiled and ungrateful. I was scared at that point and asked him to leave. He wouldn't. I managed to get to my car with him following me, and I showed him through the window that I was calling the police. He swore at me and left. I didn't call the police that night. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, thinking he was just frustrated. One of my biggest regrets is not calling them. The next morning, I found wildflowers that looked like they were picked from a garden at my front door, as well as a post-it with the word "sorry" and a sad face drawn on it. At work that day, I was called by the nurse in charge, who took me aside, saying my boyfriend was here to see me, as it's urgent. She also told me to tell my boyfriend that he should not come to see me at work again, especially since I wasn't on break, as it's unprofessional. It was Jake. He wanted to ask me if I'd gotten his flowers and message. I went off on him, saying things along the lines of, how dare he come to my work, get me into trouble no less, pose as my boyfriend. All this took place in the canteen. He didn't say anything, didn't apologize. I told him to knock it off and I left. Things only got worse from there. He would often wait for me when I got home, try to bribe me with gifts, more flowers. He even went as far and got me a new guitar. I accepted nothing and always left everything where he had put them. I eventually broke down to my dad, who asked if I wanted him to speak to Jake. I said no. He offered for me to move back in with him, but I had too much pride and declined. My dad was really worried about me. One day, everything came to a halt when I came home to my front door ajar, though not broken. My front room looked absolutely ransacked. I ran to my car and called the police. Nothing was missing, absolutely nothing, but my front room, kitchen, and bedroom were all rummaged through. I told the police I had an inkling it was Jake, who they ended up questioning, but his friend vouched for him and said they were together that evening, so it couldn't have been Jake. I still don't believe that. I tried to tell the police everything that has been happening with Jake and how I was starting to feel very unsafe. However, I had no proof but the notes he'd left me, which weren't threatening. So since there was no threat to life or well-being, they literally couldn't do anything. My dad helped me clean everything up and I had my locks changed. Jake actually left me alone for a little while after that. I started looking for new places to live around that time. Then, one evening, I'd come home, eaten some food, showered, and went to bed, only to be awoken, I'm not sure when, to somebody standing in my doorway. I didn't move. I remember originally thinking I was having a sleep paralysis episode, but after moving my fingers, I realized I was fully awake, with a dark figure clearly standing in my doorway. My phone was under my pillow, so I rolled over to my side, pretending to still be asleep, and I just waited, with my hand under my pillow on my phone. There was no way I could call the police without alerting the person in my doorway. Eventually, I could hear the footsteps fade, and then I called the police, only telling them my address and that someone just broke into my home and that I think they are still there. I got out of bed, grabbed the keys on my nightstand, and got out of the house by going through a window. I then bolted it to my car. I had on a tank top and shorts. I didn't even have any shoes on, which made driving horrible. I saw him then when I was pulling out, standing in the kitchen through the window. It was Jake. I had a small essential oil diffuser next to the window that shined enough light to be able to tell who the figure was. I drove as I spoke to the police. I remember just completely detaching from reality. At least that's what it felt like. I drove to my dad's house. After looking over my house, the police drove to my dad's home where I was. I told them everything about Jake, how he's been following me, coming to my work, waiting for me when I got home, and now I was 100% sure he broke into my home and was planning to do God knows what. I was told that they found my front door locked when they got there, and they went to knock on Jake's door. He answered and looked as if he'd just woken up. They asked him some questions and they left him alone. It's so unimaginably hard to prove that you're being stalked in the UK. I managed to get a restraining order on the grounds of harassment, with proof that he'd come to my workplace posing as my boyfriend, and I had a co-worker who could support me in this, as she overheard our conversation, where I asked him to stop following me. I'd also saved some texts he sent me, where I asked him how he got my number and told him to stop contacting me, but he went on to send some vaguely threatening messages along the lines of, "I'll be waiting when you come home today," which, along with the workplace incident, as well as the fact that I'd mentioned Jake to the police when my house was broken into, managed to get me the restraining order. I went back to that house once with my dad and his friend to gather out all of my things. I didn't see Jake that time, or ever again for that matter. I had to transfer workplaces back to my original workplace as I moved back in with my dad. I'm now moved away and live alone again, trying to put the past behind me. But this type of thing definitely messed a little with me. I had to get some therapy and found it difficult to develop friendships, especially romantic relationships. He somewhat ruined that for me. I've not made any new friends since, never had a boyfriend either. I find it very hard to trust people outside of work colleagues and family. This happened to me during the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, until I moved out due to the fear of living alone in my apartment. For a bit of backstory, I'm a 22-year-old British female, and I've been living in Japan since April 2015. The apartment I first lived in was rented out by a company connected to my school. It was not a good apartment at all, but at the time, I didn't know what the general quality and size versus price of Japanese apartments were, and I got given one of 5 that I chose before I moved. The apartment was seriously tiny, 1 room, kitchen connected, and bed about 2 steps away from it. I could walk the length of my whole apartment in about 10 steps, but I was excited because it was my first time living alone, and in a country I'd previously only dreamt about living in. After about a month of living and studying in Japan, I met my ex-boyfriend. He told me that the area I lived in was not a good one, and known for inhabiting creepy people. He warned me not to walk alone at night anymore, or if I did, then to not wear headphones and be wary. I kicked myself for the countless times I'd walked the 30-minute journey home from the clubs while really drunk after hearing this. Japan generally is a really safe country, but not so much for females that are alone. Anyway, on to the story. I'd been living there for 6 months when my best friend returned to England and moved out. He lived to my right. This left me a bit scared because I'd noticed previously that the neighbor on my left was a bit odd. He would constantly clear his throat as if he was coughing up a fucking hairball or something. He didn't live immediately next to me, but down the hall, so when I exited my room and looked left, his door was in view. On the left were stone stairs going up to nothing. I was on the top floor, and if you went past the stairs, you'd be standing outside his door, and on the left is more hallway and stairs going down. I only took these stairs to do my washing. There were shared machines on the bottom floor. Otherwise, I'd always use the stairs on my right at the end of the hall. because the stairs leading to the washing machines were always full of spiders. Fuck that. So, my friend moved out, and after that, I noticed this guy a lot more. At this point, I'd never seen his face, but I'd know when he was out or in his apartment in the evenings due to the light that would yellow his peephole if it was on. My peephole was smashed by a previous tenant, so if he looked at mine, he wouldn't be able to tell if I was in or not, luckily. He still cleared his throat all the time, and despite having space between us, it was loud enough to sound like it was coming from outside my door. That's how loud he did it. To be fair though, our walls were crazy thin. I didn't think much of him until I started noticing that when I went outside my door to smoke, in clear view if he were to look through his peephole, his light would suddenly turn off. The previous yellow peephole would go black. I didn't think too deeply about it since I would usually go out at night and maybe he just decided to go to bed, and I coincidentally saw it every time. Anyway, one day I went out front for a cigarette, saw his peephole go black. I stared at it while I smoked, trying to pick up any changes in light to confirm or disprove my theory that he hadn't turned the light off and it was in fact blacked out by his own face. I was standing this time for some reason. I usually sat down, but I had a weird feeling this day and stayed standing. I forgot to mention that our doors are metal, so opening and closing them makes a really loud noise. I stubbed out my cigarette and put it in my ashtray when I noticed him open his door and start coming out. I was on high alert, so a bit panicked, but I thought, meh, he's probably just taking his trash out or something. Then I went cold as I noticed he wasn't holding anything at all. He just stood there, facing me. I turned as slowly and naturally as possible to go into my apartment as he started walking past the hall to the stairs and towards my apartment. The path was straight, so if he was intending on walking past me, he'd have to keep his feet straight. But he didn't. His walk was angled towards me, and the space between our doors was less than 3 meters. I opened my door, and he suddenly started to walk much faster. I got round my door and entered, closing it, and just had enough time to see him lurch towards my door as I slammed it shut and locked it. He stopped outside. I couldn't see him because of the broken peephole, but I didn't hear him keep going past my door or going back to his, so I knew he was right there on the other side. As I was listening intently, I saw my handle very slightly jiggle. He was trying to open my door with fuck knows what intentions. I waited for maybe 30 seconds before I heard him finally turn and walk back to his place, and then I heard his door close. I was extremely panicked at this point, so I called my male school friend and explained everything. He asked if I wanted him to come over, but he lived pretty far away from me and it was already late, so I told him I'd be okay. He stayed on the phone with me for a while as I calmed down. During our conversation, he asked me to open my door and close it to see if the guy would come out. I did, opening and closing it hard, listening intently, and to no surprise, I heard his door open and close again after he probably paused and stared, wondering why he'd heard my door but not seen me. After this, I was so scared to be in my apartment at night or go out for cigarettes. I started testing it, leaving my room silently, smoke, then close my door normally after I was done and listen. Sure enough, every time I closed mine, I'd hear his door open. Occasionally I heard him come to my door and just stand there, probably listening for a sign if I was in or not. One night I was out smoking and the creep came home as I was there. I was frozen still, staring at him out of the corner of my eye. He didn't even open his door at first. He just stood there staring at it for way longer than normal. I'd almost finished my cigarette when he finally opened it and went in. Another thing that I can't 100% say was him, but I'm pretty sure it was. Sometimes I would smoke in the stairwell when it was raining, because the rain would hit me when I stood outside my door. I smoked, put my cigarette in my ashtray. It kind of smelled bad, so I left it there on the stairwell. Third step, same one I habitually sat on when I smoked there. I left it tucked in the corner by the wall and went inside, closing my door normally, and went to bed. I knew the people that lived on my right, 1 to 3 doors down. We all used the second stairwell when we went out, not the one I was sat on, and I know for a fact that they don't smoke. On the left of my creepy neighbor's room was a Chinese couple that I didn't know. They and the creep always used the stairs that led down to the washing machines. The stairs I was sat on, as I said before, aren't used because they go up to nothing, and they aren't even visible unless you walk around the corner. Anyway, I go back the next morning to get my ashtray, and not only was it now a couple of steps up and in the middle, there was a cigarette butt and scrunched up packet of cigarettes, same brand that I smoke. I don't know if it was him, but that stairwell is only easily visible to us. This was all happening over the later months of 2015 and the beginning of 2016. The thing that finally convinced me to move out was the following. I'd been out for dinner with my boyfriend, and we got back after 11. To enter the gate at my apartment after 11 p.m., you need a key as they lock it. I was walking faster than my boyfriend, turned a corner leading to my apartment, and I saw a figure stood in the darkness near the gate, waiting and watching me approach. He started to appear from the shadows, away from the apartment and towards me. My boyfriend turned the corner, and as soon as this guy noticed him, he pulled his phone out and quite clearly pretended to talk to someone on it. My boyfriend and I walked past, and he slowly followed. I didn't realize at this point that it was my creepy neighbor, but we were silent, both wary of the situation. As I got to the gate, I noticed that it was locked, and I started searching in my bag for my keys. The guy came up, said excuse me, and nonchalantly opened the gate and stood on the other side. I'd found my keys by this point, and was holding them ready to lock the gate again, but the guy was stood as if he was waiting to see if my boyfriend would enter with me or not. I showed him my keys, said thank you, and that I'd locked the gate. He reluctantly left before my boyfriend had come in, and we watched him go up the stairs, but we didn't see which apartment he went into. When I saw that he'd used the washing machine stairs, it clicked that it was my creepy neighbor, and I told my boyfriend. We went up the same stairs, slowly. I went first and peered around the corner to where my neighbor lived. He was stood there, waiting, staring at his door, but not opening it. He noticed me come around and turned to me, staring until he saw my boyfriend, and then went inside abruptly. This was the last incident I could handle. I knew that he was up to no good, and I didn't want to wait for anything else to happen, so I decided after that to cancel my contract and move out. I had to pay a fair amount to do it too. Until the day I moved, he still did creepy things. I'd hear him outside my door, or see the black peephole, and know he was staring at me. I live in Montana, and a few years ago I was forced to relocate after my landlord decided to rent to her son. The community I had lived in for 11.5 years has become incredibly expensive, $787,000 median home price. Unfortunately, I was forced to relocate to another city, and because of the unexpected move and associated costs, I moved in with a roommate. My roommate left to pursue better job prospects after 3 months after I moved in. Our unit was a triplex, so there were 2 gentlemen that inhabited the other units. I was never added to the lease, as the property manager required a full deposit, and I was not in a financially healthy spot at the time. I remained in the unit for 1.5 years on my own, paying the rent and utilities. I became very good friends with the man in the unit closest to mine. His name was Devin. Devin was a disabled veteran in recovery. I am also a veteran, so he held a soft spot in my heart. We shared meals, hung out, and discussed all of life's mysteries, and we would look out for one another. Devin had gone to treatment for 6 weeks, and I had watched his cat while he was gone. Our friendship developed over the course of a year and a half. Devin had expressed romantic interest. However, right from the beginning, I clearly informed Devin that I did not share those feelings, and we would never be more than good friends. Devin seemed to be lonely, which made sense. However, I'm a person who requires alone time to recharge my batteries. I set strict boundaries for Devin as he wanted to hang out all of the time. I would catch him walking through the front yard multiple times a day to get the mail, which I believed was to see if I was outside so he could stop to chat. When I would leave in the morning to go to work, Devin was always outside to tell me I looked nice and to have a good day. I told him that made me feel uncomfortable, and he should just send a text letting me know if he wanted to hang out and wait for a response. There were a couple of times I yelled at him for overstepping my boundaries. The first, I had just got home and pulled into my garage. I was on a phone call and it stayed in the car. Devin looked through the garage window to see if I was home. I was annoyed, but didn't really think much of it. The second, I was getting dressed in my room in the summer, so I had left the window open a crack. I felt this was safe, as the window was not in a place that anyone should be walking by, as it was on the patio at the back of the home. I caught Devin peeking through. I lost it. I let Devin know under no uncertain terms that his behavior was inappropriate, and that if he didn't respect my boundaries, we would no longer be friends. Last year, while I was still in the home, I had asked Devin to watch my dog for a couple of days so I could go to a family event out of the state. Devin was happy to help, and I was very appreciative. Not long after I returned, I started to notice strange things in my home, but I really just thought it was me. For instance, I would be fairly certain I'd locked my door in the morning when I left for work, but when I returned, it would be unlocked. I would be sure I had shut off all the lights, but when I got home in the evening, one would be on. I really just thought it was absent-mindedness. Fast forward a couple of months, and my mom became sick with cancer. My sister watched my dog while I went to tend to my mom. My sister reached out to me and asked if anyone else had a key to my apartment. I let her know she had the only spare key, but I asked why. Similarly, she had experienced the same issues with lights and locks. I had not shared my concerns with my sister prior to her communicating hers with me, as I really just doubted my own sanity. While I was out of town, I received a text message from Devin asking if I had a potato he could borrow. I let him know I was out of state with my mom who was sick. Devin did not reply, which was out of character, but I had noticed a change in Devin's effect. He was more reserved and less friendly towards me. I thought it probably had to do with my firm adherence to my boundaries, which was okay. He didn't have to like them, just respect them. When I got back to town, one night I stayed over at my sister's house after helping her move. As mentioned before, I was struggling financially, so I would carefully budget and plan my weekly meals. The morning before my sister's move, I had placed 3 pieces of bacon into a Ziploc bag to be used later for a BLT. When I returned the following morning, much to my disbelief, there were only 2 pieces of bacon. I held the bag in my hands, knowing that there had been 3. No longer did I doubt myself. I called my sister and let her know that someone had been getting into my house. I always keep the place locked. The only logical thing that could have happened is that Devin made a copy of my key when he had watched my dog in the fall. My sister reminded me about the potato text. The potato in the counter basket was gone. I had enough information to be certain my neighbor had violated my trust and was no friend. However, I still wasn't afraid of him. As I mentioned, he's a disabled vet and was somewhat feeble and sickly. I was not scared of a confrontation. I immediately went to the hardware store and purchased a camera that streams to your phone once the motion detector has been activated. I placed it facing the side door where Devin would enter. It also had two-way audio capability, so my plan was that when Devin decided to enter my home again, I would see it and say over the camera something to the effect of, "Get the fuck out of my house, put the key you copied on the counter, and never speak with me again, or I will contact law enforcement." As I said before, I was not on the lease, and I did not want to be homeless, so I could not turn to the property manager for help, and Devin knew it. In the evenings, I started placing a jug of cat litter and a kitchen chair in front of the door that I knew Devin was accessing the apartment from, but I never expected he would attempt to come in while I was at home, and really, he had only taken a piece of uncooked bacon and a potato. Laying on the couch one night, watching TV, I thought that I'd heard something sliding on the floor in the laundry room where the door was, but I knew there was no way he would come in while I was home. My cat was running around playing, so I decided it was probably just her, and I was being paranoid because of all that had happened. The next morning, while changing my laundry, I noticed the litter and the chair had been pushed 3 to 4 inches. I checked the sensitivity of the camera and found that I was able to replicate by slowly opening the door. Devin tried to come in while I was home. Why? That morning, I took bear spray into the shower with me while my knees knocked. I was terrified. I felt vulnerable and violated. Devin knew that I knew now also. He knew that I had placed a barrier in front of the door. After that morning, he was never outside in the morning, nor did he walk through the yard to get his mail. I obtained a firearm for protection and did make a police report. The police officer was annoyed with me as I did not want him to approach Devin, as all Devin would need to do is report me to the property manager, and then I would be homeless. I'm grateful that whatever he was up to was apparently thwarted. The fact that he tried to come in while he knew I was home gives me the heebie-jeebies. I wonder if he went through my underwear, watched me while I slept, and whatever else that's creepy. Since my situation has greatly improved, I ended up moving out shortly after to take care of my mom. I got my own place again a few months ago. I will never put my trust in another neighbor for pet or house sitting again. It still blows my mind that I had some douchebag stealing from and likely stalking me. This story just solidifies one should always trust their gut. There were so many times that a red flag was screaming, and I just thought I was the crazy one. For a bit of background, I used to live with my good friend in an apartment complex on the sketchier side of town, and with that came the usual crazies, but nothing we couldn't handle, almost, except for our next-door neighbor. The complex was smaller than a typical one, only 2 buildings and a shitty pool. We lived on the bottom floor, and directly across from us was my neighbor's door with a little walkway in between that would take you to the parking lot of the complex, what he called the vestibule. My neighbor's name was Tim. It was a pretty small space, so if we both came out of our apartment at the same time, then we'd pretty much run into each other. Tim loved his vestibule. He put out flowers and constantly swept to keep it clean and whatever else. We didn't mind at all, nor paid much attention to it really. We just thought he wanted to keep his apartment looking as nice as it could, which is respectable. We lived in the apartment for 2.5 years and never realized how obsessed he was with the vestibule until my girlfriend and I came home from dinner one day and found a note taped to our door. It was written in Sharpie and looked like a ransom note. The note read in all caps, "No smoking on the vestibule. We pulled the note off the door, confused as to why it was there, when Tim's door flew open and he walked right up to us. It was like he was watching the door, waiting for us to come home or something, because there was no way he could have heard us unless he was right next to the door. He looked like he was fuming, yet talked in a soft, calm voice. It was definitely strange, and it put off a very creepy vibe. The conversation went something like this. "Did you get my note?" "You mean this one?" I then held the note up to him. "Yeah. Did you read it?" he says as he starts to move closer. Yeah, but we don't smoke on the walkway or in the house for that matter. We smoke over in the parking lot, so it wasn't us." He then whispers, "It's a vestibule." "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you." "It's a vestibule, and I need to clean it, so stop smoking out here." With that, he does a 180 and slams his door behind him. We were stunned, to say the least. I've barely ever talked to the guy in the last 2 years, except the simple hey when we happened to cross paths in the parking lot or on the vestibule. So it freaked us out, to say the least. We went inside, chalked it up to "this place is full of crazies," and forgot about it. We watched a movie, drank a little, and went to bed. The next morning was a Monday, so I left in the morning for work. My roommate had already left as well, so it was just my girlfriend in the apartment. She worked afternoons, so she usually wouldn't text me until about noon, and I never really texted her first so she could sleep. But that day, she never texted me. 12:30 rolls around, so I text her first, thinking she has to be up by now, and probably forgot or something. And that's when my heart sank. She responded to my, "Hey, good morning," with, "He's trying to break in." I quickly call her a couple of times, and she's not picking up, so now I'm freaking out. I run to my boss to let him know someone is breaking into my house, and he lets me go. I'm calling and calling, but she won't pick up. I decided to call my roommate and let him know someone is breaking in, so he's on his way too. I'm thinking my girlfriend's been hurt or something when she finally calls me back. Turns out she was on the phone with the police. When I pick up the phone, she's hysterical, crying, and incoherent. I calm her down enough to figure out what's wrong. She says that someone is pounding on the door and twisting the handle, and she thinks it's the neighbor. He hadn't broken in yet, but he's yelling and screaming while kicking the door over and over so loud that I can hear it through the phone. He's not screaming words either, just crazy loud yelling. I'm furious, to say the least, and speeding to get home. I stay on the phone with my girlfriend the entire time to make sure she's okay. When I get back, I see police walking away from my apartment. I rush up to them and tell them I'm the owner of the apartment, trying to explain the situation. They respond by saying they tried knocking on the door, but no one answered. Yeah, dumbass. Why would she open the door for knocking when he was knocking too? That's what I wanted to say to the officer. I talk to the officer and tell him that I wanted to press charges. They said they would take a report and left. They didn't even come back to make sure my girlfriend was okay. I walk over, and that man's not there anymore. There's just boot marks on the door and a note taped to it. It read, in red Sharpie this time, "No smoking on the fucking vestibule." The note was horrifying. It was like a mental patient in an asylum wrote it. Instead of a single piece of tape holding it up, it was taped on every single side. I rip it off and go inside to find my girlfriend hiding in the closet, sitting there, bawling her eyes out. I comfort her and get her some water. My roommate comes through the door at this point and looks pissed. I show him the note, and we both go over to confront the man. Maybe even kick his ass, I don't know. It was implied. As soon as we exit the place, this man's door opens, meaning, once again, he was probably watching us. "Did you get my note?" "Fuck your note. Who the fuck do you think you are trying to break into my house?" "What do you mean? I just put the note up." No, you were pounding on the door and jiggling the handle, trying to get in. Well, I knocked, but definitely didn't pound on your door or anything. My girlfriend was in there and is shaken up because you were trying to break in, and I could hear you through the fucking phone screaming. This is where he froze, and I realized that he didn't think anyone was home. He just said, "No smoking on the vestibule," and shuffled back into his apartment. My roommate yelled, "Fuck your vestibule," and then kicked his door, which I found pretty funny. Our guess was that he thought he could get away with kicking and trying to break our door down, and he realized we knew it was him. It made us wonder how many times he tried to kick our door in when we weren't home. My girlfriend didn't leave the house for probably a week after that. She used her vacation time because she couldn't bring herself to go outside alone in the chance that he would be there. A few days later, his wife, who I've never seen in my life, only heard because she too would have fits of rage that you could hear from outside the house, came over and explained that he was schizophrenic and that he also has OCD, so he takes the vestibule very seriously. She then asked if she could use my oven to make brownies with a big, creepy smile, instilling into my mind that these people are out of their minds crazy. I told her absolutely not, that the two of them need to stay the fuck away from anyone that comes in and out of this apartment. If he yells at even one more person, that we're gonna call the police and slam the door in her face. I was just so angry and furious. I was tired of dealing with all these creeps and weirdos, and now it was affecting the lives of my loved ones. So I decided I needed a change, and found a new place shortly after all of this, and moved out last month. My roommate followed suit. He moved out this month, leaving behind that hellhole for good. I haven't seen that man since, and hope that whoever moves into that place doesn't smoke on the vestibule, because God help them if they do. Several years ago, we bought a house with a little creek running through the backyard. Who wouldn't want a house in such a tranquil setting? The third day we owned our new home, our next-door neighbor came over to introduce herself. "Hi, my name is I'm an asshole." She greeted us cheerfully. We had an odd conversation, and when she left, my husband and I looked at each other and asked, what was that all about? That afternoon, I joked to my husband, "I can't believe I just moved next door to someone with plastic flowers in her yard. I'm an avid gardener." The next morning, when we got up, all the plastic flowers were gone. It was like a Twilight Zone moment. When I was gardening in the backyard or front yard, Ima was soon outside striking up a conversation. She had a way of making statements that catch you off guard and beg for a reply. She managed to get a lot of personal information from me before I figured out what she was doing. Ima had several dogs, and their barking was a nuisance. Every night, no matter what time we went to bed, the dogs would start barking under our bedroom window within a minute of turning the lights out. It took us months to figure out that she was watching for our lights to go out. How creepy is that? I politely asked her to keep her dogs away from our bedroom window late at night. She put a huge grin on her face and said, "No, I can't do that." Then the barking got worse and worse, and she stepped up the harassment several notches. I would either be polite or just put down my gardening tools and go into the house. Even though I never saw her watching me, she had ways of letting me know that she saw everything I did. I felt like I was being stalked. She never bothered my husband, and my husband didn't believe me when I told him the things that she was doing and saying to me. One day, I took my husband's car somewhere, and Ima assumed I was home alone. She started in with her harassment and creepiness. When I got home, my husband was shaken. He never doubted me after that. We had a nice neighbor on the other side of us, and one day I asked her if she ever had any problems with Ima. She unloaded stories of years of abuse. Oh, swell. What have we gotten ourselves into? We finally contacted animal control and filed a complaint about the barking. They asked us to keep a record of when the dog started and stopped barking. The result, they barked between 60 to 70 hours per week. After a couple of weeks, I couldn't waste any more time keeping track. Ima was not happy about the dog complaint. Her next move was to call 911 the night of February 13th. At 11:45 p.m., 2 police cruisers and 4 cops showed up at our door for a domestic violence call, courtesy of Ima. Happy Valentine's Day. Every few months, Ima would get the urge to call 911 and report me for harassing her, even though by this time, I had no longer spoke to her and went inside whenever she came outside. What we didn't know then was that Ima had a wheelchair, and after she called 911, she'd get in it before the police showed up. She'd tell the cop the sob story that she was a poor, old, handicapped senior citizen being brutally harassed by me. I'm 2 years younger than Ima. Yeah, I'm a senior citizen too. Then the cop would come over to our house to ream me out for being such a horrible neighbor. Since my hair isn't gray, thanks to my hairdresser, I look much younger than Ima. So the cops assume she's much older and more vulnerable. After several episodes of this, we installed covert video cameras. 2 months after getting the cameras, Ima had the hankering for the company of a uniformed officer. After hearing her sob story, he came over to our house and told us to move away and stop harassing all the neighbors. To his credit, he agreed to view the video footage. The viewing left him speechless. Not only was there no wheelchair in sight, but everything she told him that I said and did to her, she had actually said and done to me. Shortly after we got the cameras, Ima tried to run me down with her car when I was out for a walk. When a friend of hers tried the same trick, we got it on camera. I didn't have to call 911 when that happened, because Ima called 911 first with a pack of lies. The officer that responded refused to take a look at the footage. Oh well. From time to time, Ima parked her car in front of our house and just sat there and watched us. She'd take photos and videos of us inside our house. She only did that once after we got the cameras. They're covert only to a point. If you zoom a camera in on them, you'll see them. She toned down her act after that. Things were quiet for almost a year. Then, one night, we heard a loud boom and the house shook. We peeked out the bedroom window and saw a couple of cars parked in front of Ima's house and a few people milling around her front yard. We got up and looked at the footage, and we saw Ima's son light something up and throw it at our house, toward our bedroom. Then, the explosion that shook the house. We called the police, but since there were no injuries or damage to the house, only burnt up plants in the yard, they wouldn't even file a report. A few days later, we met with a realtor. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. April Marie, Kaidi Kerbal, Skyla Hannah, Megan Anderton, Chuck Taylor 308, Janita Frey, Bobson Dugnut, Farmer Power Law, Melissa Friesen, The Tijara, Brooke, Nikki Bundrand, Thomas Doolittle, Jennifer Chamberlain, Denise Watson, Zero Bite, Erica Asir, Forgotten Ruins TV, Night Shadow, Healing with Ev, Talisha Kluss, Donna Cox, Holy Crusader, Sheila Grant 44, Julie Hibbins, Stephanie McLaren, Janet Mills Rice, Bob Jeff, Master Dom Howie, Denise Watson, Roz, Cassandra Wyatt, Travis Smith, Zoe D, Kat Philbin, Melissa Friesen, Lorna Clark, Kathy Richmond, Natasha Hensley, Jaleesa Ferguson, Leah McBride, Emily Pearson, Tyler Wilson, Lynn Meese, Kristen Berto, Shaz, Betty Brantley, Candice Lee, Africa Winfield, Becca, Lydia Adams, Girl Veteran, Legends CBZ 69 2012, Katrina King, Hospital Cakewalk, Dirty Diana, Quinta Siegel, Shirley Porch, Taylor Ruist, Annalisa Petrie, Jasmine Davis, Janelle Jensen, Jasper Roth, Alex, Monica Levalace, James Gargano, Sarah P., Fire 05, Mad as a Felter, Tierra Sanders, Melissa Kingery, Kitty Cat Luna 2, Chelsea Moffat, Ryan, Gabrielle, Jenny, Sarah, Zep Tepe, Sarah C., Sam, Amanda Jane, Vampy Debs, October Gypsy, Rebecca, Erica B., Maribel De Luna, Lloyd Rash, Jennifer Jenkins, Kelly Townsend, Mary Wright, Tara Harris, Elizabeth Knapp, Eddie, Sean Gorman, Sue Gordon, Spider's Web, Kay, Christy, Absinthe Alice, Dina Kingery, Snowball Rathina, Lady Drackard, Brenda, Pretty Girl 215, Amber Davis, Sigma Cube X, Letitia Acklin, Ali O'Neill, Gina Eberhardt, Lilypad, Ashley Nicole, Sarah Chifalo, May 2nd, 2003, Bella Plays 2006, Skincrawler, Stephanie McLaren, Borderline Betty, Kuro, Top Up, Kelly Ann Bain, Michael O'Malley, Neil Kavanagh, The Dead Movie Society, Diana Johnston, Taya Atwell, Danielle, Possum Posse, Crafty Kell, Brooke, Scott McKenzie, Megan Abrams, Jane Wiggins, Jasmine Davis, Jack White, Your Pappy's Dilly, Emma Lisa, Tanya Ferguson, The Wendy, Ember Hops, Alexia Tuttle, Ram Beltran, Elizabeth Mayers, Unladylike 13, Pegasus Genesis, Sheila Grant 44, Sona, Scout Mom 405, Cheryl Duckworth, Ashley Bray, Angela Reeves, Kim Thompson, Brock Bollard, Nick Bigdowski, Jessica Lasley, Yennefer, Clarice Scott, Timothy Stratton, Melissa Kingery, Shane Stevens, Serge Vargas, Bart in Real Life, April Jordanet, Lisa Prentice, Mason Hayes, Sarah Price, Jasmine Thomas, Angie Lindop, Z. Harris, Kirby Harris, Yolo Sapien, Lavina Cordelia, Misty Racour, Michelle Green, Dixie Busby, Paula Ferreira Nieves, Samantha Place, Donna Cox, Stephen Wheeler, Melissa Moore, Deshaun Edmondson, This Bad Kitty, Gloria, Christina Myway, Connie Sue, Carol Zaffarano, Merciful Humming, Kelsa Rundle, Ashley Juster, Vicky Howell, Joe Tozer, Zoe D, Nicholas Johnson, Kimmy Love. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.